the fall of 2014, I took a hiatus from my college work at the University of New Hampshire in order to get more experience in the field, as well as to broaden my perspective as a wildlife and conservation biology major. Knowing that I had just a semester before coming back to UNH, I sought out a radical change. In my mind's eye, I'd be able to look back on these upcoming 3 months years from now, and draw on it as inspiration to make my time in the field of conservation matter. It would remind me of the kind of people, animals, and places that I would be fighting for, and what's at stake if human industry continues unabated. This place would have to be remote, one of the last remaining wild places that we have left. Where I went was Patagonia. After landing in Chile's capital, Santiago, I met the 7 other undergrads who would make up the rest of the student group of the program. Desi Nowinski, Natalie Stoneburner, Sylvia Kinosian, Blaise Sullivan, Christina Benoist, Elliot Casper, and Izzy Lazarus. Although we were spread across the country, and many of us had never met before, we were all attracted to the experience offered by Round River Conservation Studies, an organization based in Salt Lake City that specializes in educating college students through actual ecological research. Together, we flew south to Coyhaique, where we met our 3 instructors, Jessica Hightower, Elizabeth Brunner, and Matteo Pomilio. Here, we went over our curriculum, as well as the focus of our work in Chile. While driving further south to Cochrane, we had time to talk and get a better idea of the work that we would be doing. Over the next 3 months, we would be working essentially under contract with CONAF, the Chilean Forestry Service, and Conservación Patagónica, an offshoot of the larger Tompkins Conservation, a private organization conceived by 2 eco-philanthropists, Doug and Chris Tompkins. Both orgs are 2 of the heavyweights in terms of conservation in Chile. However, neither operate without opposition. Once in Cochrane, we met Alberto, Angelica, and Bastión, a family on the perimeter of town who offered their guest house and yard as an unofficial base of operations for the duration of our stay in country. Here, overlooking the Rio Cochrane, we will sift through our notes, get more supplies, and recharge before heading out again for the next wave of fieldwork. Located about an hour northeast of Cochrane, Vai Chacabuco was our main focus during the first and last month of our program. Unlike much of the country that we had already seen, the valley was semi-arid, with harems of guanacos, close relatives of llamas, roaming vast steppe habitat. Here, our time would be split into 2 types of research, bird counts and vizcacha surveys. Like all of our projects, bird counts were used to find the distribution of specific populations within a given area. They also doubled as a way of estimating avian biodiversity. Counts were carried out at specific points in a randomized pattern with a pre-designed area of observation. In this case, this radius was about 400 meters. Each count's location was marked on a GPS and lasted 20 minutes. These counts were conducted by 2 to 4 people, with 1 taking notes and the rest solely observing. Observations were written down on a standardized record sheet, in which data such as date, time, weather, wind rating, habitat type, species, gender, number, behavior, and whether the observation was an actual sighting or an auditory indication. In order to get the most accurate data of bird populations in an area, counts were usually conducted at dawn, as this is usually the peak time of activity for most birds. Vizcacha surveys were conducted in much the same way and for the same reason as bird counts. Wolfson's vizcacha, Legidium wolfsoni, is one of 4 vizcacha species. They are a large rodent in the family Chinchillidae, usually residing in the high cliffs and boulder fields of Argentina and Chile. Because of the selectivity of habitat, these surveys were conducted opportunistically. Groups of 3 to 4 covered each survey point, which was measured at a 50-meter transect using a tape measure. A 10-meter zone of focus was then found within those 50 meters using a random number generator from the numbers 5 to 45. From this focus point, the surrounding 10 meters of cliff face was inspected for vizcacha feces. While one person searched for fecal matter, the others took GPS waypoints at the start and end of the 50-meter transect, as well as the center of the designated 10-meter line. From this center, the rock type of the cliff, its slope, aspect, measurements of the top 5 largest crevices on its face, as well as dominant vegetation and ground cover percentages, were also recorded on a standardized sheet. 1 month after arriving in Chile, our group left the dry Chacabuco Valley for the fjords or esteros and evergreen forests of the Bernardo O'Higgins National Park. Although Round River has had a presence in Patagonia for over 3 years, our group is only the second to do any research in Bernardo O'Higgins National Park. Because of this, our month's stay in the park was very much exploratory, with the majority of our time being spent bushwhacking from fjord to fjord. Even entering the park felt somewhat improvised, as we could only reach our starting point by a 14-hour boat ride from the nearest town of Tortel. From our drop-off point at Estero Langre, our plan was simple: work our way up the valley to the north, hike up a pass through the mountains to our east, and continue to push north until we reached Estero Bernardo, where the one and only building in the park stood, a small CONAF refugio. As 2 of the few park rangers responsible for overseeing this land, Orlando and Philidor acted as resident guides, botanists, trackers, and sometimes philosophers throughout this trek. Although the scenery alone would have been enough for some to visit O'Higgins, our reason was first and foremost for ecological research. For the next month, our attention was pinned on Hippocamelus basilicus, the southern waymeal. One of the largest mammals in Patagonia and the pride of many Chileans, the commonly named South Andean deer is critically endangered, with the total population numbering around 1,500. The deer suffered a dramatic 99% reduction in population since the 1800s, mainly due to extreme habitat fragmentation from logging and agricultural development, as well as predation from domestic and stray dogs. Bernardo O'Higgins is the last safe haven for waymeal, with more than 300 individuals already sighted within its 3.5 million hectare area. In addition to our routine bird counts, our group took this opportunity in the fjords to develop a method of estimating waymeal presence and number in the areas that we traversed. Christina and I took this as our pet project, and we soon created a methodology that complemented our long days on the move. Instead of gauging species presence near our camp at the end of the day, like our bird counts, we decided to treat our hike throughout the day as a rough transect line. Every quarter kilometer traveled was treated as a transect section, with each section's start and end marked with a GPS waypoint. Any waymeal sign, from an actual sighting to scat clusters to hoof prints, were noted and used to estimate population densities within each transect section. In the end, numerous fjords and valleys were covered and recorded in our trek. However, it would take years of repetition in order to produce significant estimates of waymeal numbers in these spaces. While most of us were excited to see what the upcoming years would hold for waymeal, Orlando and Philidor voiced a warning. Within CONAF, talk of converting Bernardo O'Higgins National Park from government land to public land was underway. Many guardaparques, the Chilean version of a park ranger, feared immediate exploitation of the land if put in the hands of the people. Orlando grew up in nearby Tortel, a town that began as a major exporter of the near-endangered Cypress de las Guaticas. He asked us what is to stop the people from logging this land, which is an important habitat for this tree as much as it is for waymeal. Just a few months before arriving in Chile, Patagonia had just finished a landmark protest against the construction of 5 dams on the Baker and Pascua rivers. The $3.2 billion Hydro Ascend project was a joint venture proposed by the Italian company ENEL and Colbún S.A. Nearly from its inception, ranchers, farmers, and gauchos protested the construction, declaring that this project would not only displace families, but also fragment important habitat and mar the face of Patagonia. These people soon organized themselves into the group Sin Represas, or Without Dams. While my group was debriefed to our semester's activities in Coyhaique, we visited a Sin Represas campaign office within the city. Maria, our host, met us there and shed more light on the Hydro Ascend protests. She told us that although the dams themselves would destroy large swaths of habitat and farmland, the transmission lines that would transport this power almost 2,000 kilometers north to the capital of Santiago, were the largest threat. These lines followed a path of least resistance, and the 120-meter wide clear cut they required completely bisected wilderness areas and intruded on existing and future parks. Many Western countries, especially the US, see alternative energy as a faultless system, but it was Sin Represses' goal to alert the Chilean people of the potential impacts that green energy had on the environment. When the government approved the program, despite growing public protest, many NGOs, including Sin Represses, heightened pressure. Not losing sight of its irony, they began an extremely successful billboard and advertising campaign, protesting Hydro-Icen's destruction of Patagonia's iconic landscape. After more than 3 years of increased public protests, petitions, impact assessment plans, and stalled court cases, the government finally canceled its contract with ENEL and Colbún SA in June of 2014. This marked a huge victory worldwide for conservation, showing the people's power over environmental decisions. Although Sin Represses had finished the fight that it had started in 2007, there were still other conservation issues in the country. It is currently shifting its focus on a proposed copper ore refinery in the north of the country. Like many of the other students in my program, one of the first things that attracted me to Patagonia was the movie 180 Degrees South by Chris Malloy. Premiering in 2010, the movie followed a young climber and surfer, Jeff Johnson, as he followed in the sometimes literal footsteps of his two idols, Yvon Chouinard and Doug Tompkins. First arriving in Patagonia in the 1960s, Doug and Yvon quickly fell in love with the country, and its wilderness never left their minds, even after building monumental outdoor gear companies, the North Face and Patagonia Clothing Co. Although both still contribute to conserving land in Patagonia, Doug and his wife Chris have made it their life's work. Starting in the 90s, the couple began buying huge tracts of land in the region, eventually making the private Pumalin, Corcovado, and Ibera parks and preserves. One of their more recent purchases was via Chacabuco, a collection of sheep ranches, or estancias, that put their land up for sale after a sharp decline in the value of wool in the global market. Now 10 years after the last sheep of Estancia via Chacabuco have left the valley, Tompkins' company is overseeing the recovery of the area's steppe and forest habitats. Through Jeff's narrations, the Tompkins appear as a couple of the people, a practical force of nature whose only adversaries were their finite amount of money available to fund these acts of preservation. I thought surely a society that just willingly banned 5 hydroelectric dams because of their destructive capabilities would see the good in that. However, when I arrived in Patagonia, I saw this. To Chileans, the Tompkins were not two eco-philanthropists looking out for their children's future, but just another foreign company buying up land for private use. In Cochrane especially, the general opinion of the activity in Valle Chacabuco was skeptical at best. A cafe owner that I talked with was convinced that Doug bought it up for the Rio Chacabuco's fresh water, in order to sell it internationally. Other townspeople believed that the park would have absurdly high entrance fees, effectively allowing only rich tourists to enter its borders. Despite current opposition, the Tompkins continue the restoration, hoping that future generations recognize the long-term benefits of their work. Almost a nod to Chile's opinion of them, the Tompkins Foundation's published book, Wildland Philanthropy, reserves a short quote by Abraham Lincoln on its final page. It reads, "Laws change, people die, the land remains."
Got no place